Ladies and gentlemen, this is a little prelude to warn you. We did initially expect this to be family-friendly, but it turned to be slightly explicit due to the content, so listen at your own discretion. Ladies and gentlemen, mystery seekers, musers, conspiracy theorists, interdimensional philosophers, seekers of truth, and last but certainly not least, all of you with confirmation bias, we'd like to welcome you as we sit nestled in the ancient flood-battered Central Pangea mountain range to Musings on Mysteries in the Mythical Matrix, a podcast dedicated to exploring the fringe with logic, and where we also theorize the fourth dimension exists and is the spiritual.
So here, we're dedicated to pushing science, logic, and the Socratic method to their limits as we discuss the mysteries and mythologies of the world.
The only trigger warning for this episode is a logical conversation, so if applying the Socratic method on fringe topics is disturbing to you, you'd probably want to turn off the podcast now. And Trace, did you know that whale sharks have tiny teeth on their eyeballs?
Yes, I did. I'm pretty sure I told you that fact, actually.
I came across it on social media, but I just wanted to slip it in there to steal a fish fact from you.
I'm not sure why, though. I think I've seen something about it being about protection, but I don't know.
All right, well, I'll give it over to you for your actual fish fact. I just wanted to slip that in there for you stealing my show however many episodes ago.
So today, we're recording this in September, which in some communities it is Squidtember. So I'm getting a lot of my facts from that. So there's going to be a good string of squid facts coming up here. So first we're going to start off with the Tanangea squid. I think it's also called the Dana squid. It is a 7.5 foot long squid that has the largest photophores in the animal kingdom. The photophores are what creates bioluminescence. So they have the largest bioluminescent organ out of any animal.
That's actually really cool. That is a great fact for what we're about to talk about tonight, Trace, I think.
Okay.
Because the phenomenon we're about to talk about has connections to the ocean, as I'm sure you know. And we've discussed briefly on this podcast before, I think. But we brought in a resident expert of sorts / conspiracy theorist. So we have Phil DeMattis with us tonight. He's worked with Bill Rudge Ministries, specifically talking about the UFO phenomenon. So, Phil, can you hear me?
I can hear you wonderfully.
Perfect. So welcome to the show.
You got me on there?
I got you on here, loud and clear. So where are we heading tonight, Phil?
All right.
Where are you going to take us in our unidentified craft?
Well, we're going to start with, before we get up to Aleister Crowley, the first thing is that these UFOs have been seen for centuries. And they have always been one step ahead of man. In the 1800s, they saw air dirigibles. Mm-hmm. So they were always one step ahead of man. They were always just one step ahead of advanced of us. So in the early 2000 centuries, around 1920, I believe, Aleister Crowley ripped the veil to the fourth dimension, as you guys call it, the spiritual realm. And he got a spirit guide he called Lamb, which was a gray alien. Huh. From there, he taught John Parsons to follow in his footsteps. All this stuff was done with occult magic and sex involving children to try to open these veils. John Parsons developed a solid fuel rocket system for the United States government. So we can get into the whole theory there why I don't even think we left the planet, but that's another story. And he started his development of this in Roswell, New Mexico, the same place that the supposed spacecraft crashed and landed. And no one can ever get
I will say the Roswell crash didn't actually happen in Roswell. It happened in a town a few miles over, and the material was just brought into Roswell. So that's where that name came from, because it made Roswell papers. I can't remember the town that it was. Huh. And I also wanted to sorry, go on.
I know it was at a rancher's property nearby. That's all I can remember as of right now. But go on.
Yeah. So your explanation of in like the 1800s, it was only like one step ahead of us. and that's how it's consistently been.
Right.
Do you think that that could just be because we kind of have a limit on our explanations and knowledge of it? So like if we see something floating in the sky, people in the 1800s are going to think, oh, that's just a hot air balloon. It's a blimp. But now we think it's some futuristic anti-gravity technology kind of deal. Do you think that could be an explanation as to why they might seem one step ahead?
Yes, I think what is happening is as in the time, it said it would be as in the days of Noah and at the end times. And I think that the reason we're seeing more of this phenomenon now, I will say this, if you really study what the people say and what they've seen, over 90% of it can usually be explained. There's that 1 to 5% that just cannot be explained. But a lot of people, and I'm one of them, have the theory that the fallen angels came down to earth, mixed with the daughters of men, like it talks about in the book of Enoch, and gave birth to these giants or Nephilim. And I think that is what the demons are trying to do at this point with man, because when you do hear about abduction, there's a lot of sex involved. And I think they're trying to do that so these creatures will look similar to us instead of being such a vast differential. So back then you could tell them apart easily. Now I think they're trying to make them mingle with our society.
So I love this conversation and direction, Phil, but can you back up here for a little bit for us? And I feel like we're jumping the gun a little bit. Why don't you explain to us how we got here to this theory that you have that these are demonic entities? How do we know they're not from another dimension? How do we know they're not some kind of breakaway civilization? How do we know that it's something from the demonic, like we see talked about in the Bible, like in Genesis 6?
Well, one of the things that's important that no one really wants to talk about that involves the occult or the UFO phenomenon or any of this type of thing is that those people that are Christians that have asked Christ to protect them, the aliens or the UFOs have immediately disappeared. Now, somebody asked me once, they go, well, why wouldn't they tell you that? I says, the simple reason they don't want to tell you that is because they're selling books. Everything's about the money. It's always about the money. So if they tell you that these are interdimensional demonic creatures, and if you speak the name of Christ, you must leave in the name of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. May Jesus Christ protect me. They disappear. Then they wouldn't sell as many books. So they do not like talking about the fact that God's involved in this. Also, the way our system works, there is no way that the devices you see now are changing speeds, colors. They just don't work by our physics. There's just no way that can happen. And the only thing I myself can think of is it's an interdimensional craft, an interdimensional demonic being. I think that they have come here to deceive the masses so that people won't accept Christ. I mean, the biggest thing right now is Zechariah Stitchin and the fact that he's saying that, the Anunnaki came down. Well, My thing about Zechariah Stitchin is he is the only one that was ever able to decipher the language. How did he decipher it? If you were the only one that deciphered the language, how did you decipher? Where were your hints? Where were your cues on what to look for? You could say whatever you want that language says. You have no proof that that's what it says.
Yeah.
You only have your theory of what it says.
I'm not terribly familiar with Sitchin. I do have some vague familiarity with it. My understanding was he wasn't a scholar of any means. He didn't have any formal training in language, and he just kind of took like the Sumerian text or something akin to that and analyzed it and said, oh yeah, this is saying that space aliens came down or something along with that. Like, you could fill in the blanks here if I'm wrong, right. Phil. But that's kind of my general understanding.
No, that's pretty much what he did.
Yeah. So I mean, like, I'm not opposed. I'll tell you this. Like, I'm inclined to agree with the direction you go, Phil. I'm personally, though, I'm not opposed to the alien idea, like a tangible, physical alien from another planet or something like that. It's just, if you're going to propose that idea, you need to be consistent with how you got there. And then you have people like Zechariah Sitchin or Billy Carson or, whoever else is out there that's trying to promote these ancient alien theories. And they're taking myth and stories that have happened and they're twisting it and misrepresenting the facts. And so I don't necessarily have a problem with an argument like for a nuts and bolts craft, but it's when you take the facts and you manipulate them that it gets frustrating. And so, yeah, like from what you're saying, if I got that right on Zechariah Sitchin, then yeah, it's like I kind of got a problem with that. But yeah.
Yeah, that was his. Nobody else was ever able to decipher it but him. So, I mean, how can you? It'd be like me telling you a story. Hey, so I walked outside my house today. UFO landed in my front door, talked to me, gave me a cigar. We went in. We had a bourbon. Left. He told me everything that was going to happen in the world and how it happened. He said it's all written in those stone tablets, and here's the story.
I don't know. Sounds pretty credible to me.
Who else saw it? Who read it? Who deciphered it? So out of all these millions of people and all these scholars, you're the only one that could figure it out, and you're the only one that saw it.
Yeah.
That sounds very familiar to how the Book of Mormon came about, isn't it?
Right. He went off and I came back and I had a book. So,
oh man.
Another thing.
That's a whole nother topic.
Where in the Bible does it say that there's beings on other planets? It doesn't. It doesn't talk about that at all. So even if let's go out on a limb and say there was some, once Adam and Eve fell, the whole universe fell. Everything fell. So everything would be in sin. So there's something that's that far advanced that came here. I mean, you just got to think about common sense. I mean, let's go common sense of what man does. Man is a fallen creature. Every time man ran into a new civilization, it automatically conquered the civilization and laid waste to it. So why wouldn't they have done the same thing to us?
I mean, I think that's a fair point. I feel like they would definitely be here to be a little more malicious, or maybe that they're just a better civilization. Like, I mean, I know there's theories about if we ever reach the point where we can do space travel at that level, then there's kind of a baseline assumption that we're all kind of united and at a relative peace here on Earth. So you could argue that if there was actual life that could travel like that, then they would be a little more I don't want to put it, have a higher morality.
I don't know. It seems like you look at history, like with the Romans, like the ability to develop advanced roads and technology does tend to follow with warlike function. You look at our technological advancements in World War II as well, and how quickly we developed the atomic bomb, and how quickly we progressed in technology of like tanks and airplanes, the development of jets. It was all for military purposes. So I feel
now,
like
you do notice that. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, you're good. Go
I
ahead.
apologize.
No, I'm good.
You notice the UFOs tend to appear a lot more often after the nuclear tests and the nuclear bombs dropping. So, if you did you guys ever hear of a gentleman named Stan Gordon in Pennsylvania?
I have not.
Maybe a little familiar, but not sure.
Okay, Stan Gordon was the UFO researcher. He started all these MUFON things in Pennsylvania. And he was into all the paranormal. And I believe he's still alive. I still believe he does something, but I don't think he's in charge of it anymore. And he wrote a book called Strange Pennsylvania about UFOs, Bigfoot, Dogman, all that kind of thing. And I talked to him a couple times about it. I got one of his books. He autographed it for me. Very nice man. And I says, I think all these things are interdimensional demonic creatures. It's amazing that the UFOs just get up and disappear. That a Bigfoot gets up and disappears. That some of these people are trying to say Bigfoot came down from a UFO. So he then explained to me that he would track the UFOs. And he said they would just disappear. Like he would track them. They would follow them through the sky is what they would do. They would just disappear. It made no sense. So then he talked to me about Bigfoot. He said it was the same deal. And I said, what do you mean? He goes, I tracked it. It was snow, went in the middle of the field. It went into the middle of a field, cornfield. Boom. Footprints are gone. He said there's no footprints. There's no marks from like a helicopter, airplane, anything to lift the creature up in the air. It's just gone. So his thing was that he believes these things are all interdimensional. My thing is that I believe they're all interdimensional demonic beings to take us away from our look at God. So we don't believe in God. So instead of believing in God, we believe we're created by some alien race and we're waiting for them to come down and save us, which just is not going to happen.
No,
that's my feeling on it.
Could you say that some of these are not as demonic? Some of them might be here to help. I mean, I think there's plenty of stories. And I know there's one story in particular that some like little kid got lost in the woods and he was saved by a friendly bear, quote unquote.
There's actually a couple accounts of that when you look at like the Dave Pilatus 411 stories.
Yeah, so I think...
Are you looking at the Dave Pilatus 911? 411?
Yeah,
stores?
We've looked into it a little bit. We haven't talked about it officially on the show yet. That'll be a future episode, but we can kind of tease it a little bit here if you got some stuff on that.
You read the books?
I'm about a little more than halfway through the 411 East Coast book. And then we've watched, Trace and I both watched the 411 Hunted on Amazon, and then the other 411 that they did.
Yeah, well, and according to David Pilatus, there's the only people that have actually really come back are children under 5 years old.
Yeah.
Most people are never seen again. And if you read his books, he'll tell you never, ever go in the woods without a GPS and a gun.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. He says it right in the book. He says, do not go in that woods without a GPS and a gun. And he says he's been at places that he said everything just seemed all crazy. Is that them, taking someone? I don't know. They say, the hairy man did it. The hairy cow did it. I've heard some of the stories about the children, but children are the only ones that ever seem to make it back.
Yeah, children, and I think really, really old people that aren't able to recount their stories. Everybody else, like that's middle age, anything over like 5 to like 62 or something. It's like if they go missing, they're either not found or they're found dead in areas that have been very thoroughly searched. That was kind of my gateway.
Right.
That was kind of my gateway drug, if you will, into like the paranormal fringe. It's like you can't deny all these people have gone missing. You can't deny it because there's so many accounts of it. Like you can't just fake that many people missing with that many searchers. You can't just chalk it all up to serial killers and stuff like that. There's some cases you can, but you can't chalk all of them up to that. So the question becomes then, what happened to them?
Well, I mean, we can go off on there, but if you want to go into that direction with this, now there's no proof, no hard proof for this. Okay. But from different people I talked to that worked in the government and different stories I've read in books or heard online, the government has a deal with these demonic creatures for technology. And in exchange, they're allowed to experiment on human beings.
Wasn't it like Eisenhower that started that kind of deal?
I don't know anything about this.
That was supposedly Eisenhower when he was, I think his second term of president, supposedly made the deal with them. That's how they got the technology.
Didn't he also have a UFO sighting, I believe?
Yeah.
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 So, I don't know. We're well off into the conspiracy theory side here that I'm not familiar with. So this is great. I love it.
This one gets better because supposedly these demonic creatures are down there. They're in the earth in these caverns or tunnels or Area 51, which Area 51 is nothing now. You got to look at in the Gulf of Mexico. They have like an Area 51 other water base, and there's other bases in the country. The Area 51 is just a cover. But if you really want to go down that road, you need to look up the Colin Elite.
All right.
a man by the name of Nick Renfrew wrote a book. He's the only one I ever know that wrote a book about it. Nick Renfrew's books are constantly about the paranormal, UFOs, paranormal, everything. So supposedly he said that one of the guys from the Colin Elite came up to him, and this is a government organization. The government organization knows what the aliens are. They know they're demonic. And their theory is that half of the group feels that we should have nothing to do with them. The other half of the group is military, and they want the technology. And the other half is saying, listen, we can't control these demons. They're smarter than us. And the military says, no, we can control them. We want the technology. And they believe that's how the United States keeps making technological leaps and bounds with their military equipment.
Yeah, that's interesting.
That one you're going to have to look on the internet. It's a very interesting story.
It sounds like it. We're going to have to take a brief pause here, Phil. We got to do a brief ad break. Okay. We're going to put a pin in this. We'll be right back. And then I got something I want to add to this conversation when we come back.
Okay. All right.
All right, so ladies and gentlemen, I'm sitting here with my United States Space Force hat on to let the aliens know that we can fight them off with our superior technology. No, but in all seriousness here, Phil brought up a good point before the break here about technology. I do think it's interesting that let's put this in perspective a little bit here, where if the fourth dimension does exist, and if it is indeed the spiritual, as we theorize on the show, they would likely have their own technology. There would be technology that would function in the fourth dimension. And you look at descriptions of certain things that you do tend to see in the Bible, like the spinning wheels that have eyes on all sides. I think that I want to explore that at some point on the show, but I think there's some nuances in the Hebrew where the word for eyes might actually mean like glimmering or shining. And so you look at these things and you have to wonder, what they really are. Are they actually beings? Are they technology? What are we seeing described in the Bible here, even talking about all of this? So I guess I'll kick it back to you with that, Phil, because you're saying that these alien/demonic entities are giving the U.S. government technology, which is an interesting theory. It's definitely a conspiracy theory. I'll agree with that. But it begs the question of what this technology would look like and what they would even have. So what are your thoughts on that then, and tying this into the biblical that I just did?
Well, I think in the biblical, it's just like when they talk, I believe it was Jacob's ladder, where he saw them climb back and forth from heaven. Was it Jacob's ladder?
Yeah. Because Jacob then wrestled with God that night, I think, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking that there's technology. We have gotten too far advanced, really, since the 1960s. The leaps and bounds we have made. And my thing is, and I'm not going to go all out into this one, maybe we can discuss it another day, but if we have all this technology, why aren't we in space? This technology that we had before was nothing compared to this, and we're not in space. But that's going off in a tangent. So let's get back to this. There's been people that say that they see these machines, these crafts, and they disappear in front of them. There was a man hunting, I believe, in Arizona. He said one flew over him, and he said it was just like a giant, like football fields long. And then it just disappeared. As an interdimensional being, you would have to be able to travel back and forth against the dimensions. Now, when man fell, God said that man would no longer be able to walk with him. Adam would no longer be able to walk with him. God would not be in communion with man the way he was at the beginning, when he was in the Garden of Eden with them, walking with them, talking with them. So, I have is these demonic creatures, these interdimensional demonic creatures, are giving them technology. It's far more advanced than anything we've seen. And I believe what they are preparing for is a war against God. And using the militaries of this world to fight God. As I said, God will return. With his voice, he'll wipe out all these armies. And I believe that's what they're trying to do. They know they're going to lose, but they need people with them. They need the numbers, Because remember, 1/3 of the angels fell, 2/3 were up there. Whenever Michael went against God or a power or principality of somewhere, he would rebuke them in the name of God. And all they could do is slow him up. They couldn't stop him. So I believe the reason they're giving us this technology and we're making leaps and bounds because they know Christ's return is going to be soon and they want to be able to fight against God's return. They're going to make it seem like God and the angels are the aliens. They're going to make it seem like they're the evil ones and they need the military to fight with them. That's just my theory. That would be a big conspiracy theory for your show.
Oh, definitely.
So I have a question here. So you say that we have all this military technology, but we haven't been to space. Why do you say we haven't been to space still? Because there's still hundreds, if not thousands, of satellites. I mean, we have SpaceX.
Are they inside the? My question is: are they inside the Van Halen belt? According to our scientists, there's a Van Halen belt surrounding the Earth. It's loaded with radiation. It says nothing can pass through that and live. So what you're telling me is that capsule went up. It went through the Van Halen belt. So this would have to have been lined with some pretty heavy stuff. And it was made out of, I think, like metal and aluminum. Went through the Van Halen belt. The astronauts were never touched. They landed on the moon.
Well, even I'm just saying in general, like, so you're more so claiming that humans haven't been to space. It's not just that we haven't reached out into space with the satellites and like stuff like the Mars rover, but like we ourselves have not been to space. Is that what you're saying?
Don't sell me on the Mars rover either. I'm not so sure about that right now.
Well, I'm just trying to make an argument here of like what.
I don't think we've been in space. No, I don't think we've been in space. I don't think we've been to the moon.
Okay, interesting.
I think it was all a lie to make us look better than the Russians. That's what I think it was. I got a couple questions. I ask this from people all the time, and nobody ever explains it to me.
Okay.
First thing is, how did you get through the Van Halen belt? That was my first question.
I'm not really too familiar with that in the first place, to be honest.
It's a radiation belt that's supposed to be circling the Earth, protecting us from the infrared radiations from outer space. My next question is, when we landed on the moon, who took the picture of him getting out of that spaceship? There's nobody on the moon. There was no camera outside the spaceship.
Okay.
My next question is, they followed the footprints of the astronaut. These are the footprints. Now, maybe they lied to us again, which is something common with our government at this point in time. But they have the spacesuit at the Smithsonian Institute. The soles of the spacesuits footprints do not match the footprints that were left on the moon. They say that was the suit he wore on the moon.
Interesting.
That's the suit he wore on the moon. Footprints don't match.
I think we might have to bring you back for another episode to discuss this because I want to dive into this more and see what I can figure out. I could, unless you have more, I want to make a final statement of just like, I could see there an argument of being that our first moon landing could not be real, but then there's also how many missions we've made to the moon. I mean,
did we go to the moon? Did we make all those missions?
Like I said, I'll have to dig into it more because that would be a fun episode to do.
Here's my next question for you, because since we're on the moon thing, we're going to make this quick. Every country since us has tried to get to the moon. Why has no one got to the moon? Russians didn't make it to the moon. Chinese didn't make it to the moon. The EU didn't make it to the moon.
Okay.
We have way more technology than we had in the 60s. Why are we not on the moon?
It's because the United States of America is the best country ever.
Oh my God, stop that. And I don't even want to go into the Mars landing when they have the one where it shows the shadow of a guy working on the Mars craft. They're like, oh, it's just a weird shadow. You look at some of those pictures, you can see that some of those pictures in the rock formations are similar to some of the formations on Earth. So I'm not so sure we did got the Mars rover there. But we'd have a better chance of having that rover there than we had of a person landing on the moon.
Well, I will say,
we'll give you that.
I personally am not a huge fan of a lot of conspiracy theories. But I do think that it is not a bad practice to ask questions and to seek out the truth. As we've talked about on the show before, you're either a seeker of truth or you're a seeker of confirmation bias. And I think that we should all strive to be seekers of truth, whatever shape or form that takes. So I can definitely respect. I can definitely respect the conspiracy theorist in you there, Phil.
Hey, now listen. Now let's get back to the aliens. Now, supposedly the government has the underground bases with the aliens in there, where we think, at least I think, they're interdimensional demonic beings. A lot of proof of that. No real proof of them being from outer space. Now, an interesting fact that a military individual made a statement was that, and this was something that really stuck with me because it was something that seemed realistic. You are not allowed to mention the name of Jesus Christ in front of these creatures. Not allowed to use it.
Where does that
not allowed to use it.
Where does that come from? What's
I just happened to catch it on I'll have to try to look it up. It was a military individual who said he was in these bases. He says, you are not allowed to mention the name of Jesus Christ in front of these supposed aliens. He says it doesn't work. So that's why I think they're down there. And I think that they are trying to prepare an army to fight off Christ. Because if you make it look like, the devil's a crafty guy. He'll tell you 9 truths to get the one lie across. He'll tell you 99 truths to get the one lie across. So if you start believing that these things are not interdimensional, but they're from outer space and they created us, and you get enough people believing it, and then after you get enough people believing it, then you have them believe that they are coming because we've created a space army, remember? They let that leak out, like you said, with your space hat. So now we're out in space and we're protecting ourselves from these aliens that are coming. They're not aliens. It's God and his angels. So fallen angels have to have an army to fight back with. So why not use man to create this army?
So what led you to this conclusion to absolutely decide these aren't physical beings, or that this isn't some breakaway?
The disappearances. The stuff that happens does not go by modern physics. It doesn't happen that way. And they tend to disappear. When the military does track them, like the military's trying to track them, when they admitted there was unidentified. See, the whole thing is, I'm not saying there aren't unidentified flying objects.
Oh, of course. Yeah, there's going to be a lot of military classified aircraft flying around that we're not going to have.
No, but I
to.
mean, I'm not even saying, but what I'm saying is they're not from another planet. They're interdimensional demonic beings. They are not coming here from a planet 10 billion light years away, is what I'm saying.
They did change the name of UFO to UAP, which is
unidentified aerial phenomenon.
Yeah, so they changed it from object to phenomenon.
That is true.
So that could also mean that they might know something.
Well, what they're going to do is they've been slowly leaking everything out, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And they're doing it to deceive the masses. Listen, when God comes back, the more people Satan can take with him, the better. So the more people you deceive, and one of the best ways to deceive people, I have a friend, very good friend. He's into all this. So he sent me a video the other day of, because he's been trying to figure out God since he was in high school. So he sent me a video of a guy who's a major conspiracy theorist, and I cannot think of his name right now, but he was theorizing that, Jesus wasn't the son of God. All these other gods were the same. And he went, and I went through the movie with him and watched him, and I refuted all of them and showed him how they weren't. So I think what's happened here is they have people like Zachariah Stitchin, like that fella who wrote Chariots of the Gods, who Satan has deceived and is using these materials to deceive the masses, because everybody thinks, a lot of people think there's some hidden secret that only they know. There's got to be something more. There's nothing more. It's God. This was his son. God created us.
Well, I mean,
he created the world.
There's definitely some credence to what you're saying from in the ancient text / biblical perspective, where we do see that these, what Graham Hancock, Zachariah Sitchin, Billy Carson would all classify as space aliens, and what you would classify as demons or fallen angels. You definitely see some credence to your idea here of technology being given in things like the Book of Enoch. I think it talks about that each of the fallen angels brought a different aspect of technology or metalworking or something along with it,
right,
and that they taught it to man. And that was, I think, a component of their fall or something like that, and their rebellion that God hated. And so, this idea of advanced beings, whether the government's lying or, covering up anything, I'm not going to comment on that. I'm not that much of a conspiracy theorist. You guys could say as you please. I'm going to steer clear of that. But at the very least, the idea of interdimensional beings showing up and handing off technology is nothing new. The Bible / the Book of Enoch has taught this for, hundreds, thousands of years.
Right, exactly. The fallen angels, it even named some of the angels, and they taught man the weapons of war. They taught women makeup. And it goes to different things. See, I think that the world that we are in right now is just now getting up to the technology that they had before Noah's Ark.
I think
they had all this before.
I would agree with that. I think that they're much more advanced than we were today, just maybe in different ways.
Right.
So maybe not cell phones per se, but other aspects of technology.
I think they had all that. One of the things I always tell people is I always use the magic mirror as a definition. When I was a little kid, you watch Snow White or whatever, and they would say, mirror, mirror on the wall. The magic mirror would come to life and it would tell the wicked queen. But I would tell people, I says, why don't you flip that laptop up? And they're like, yeah. I go, what do you see? I go, a picture of myself. Why don't you talk to that laptop? They said, what do you mean? I go, ask the laptop to turn on. It turns on. Can you tell me about God? Boom, laptop tells you about God. And they said, what do you mean? I said, boy, it looks like a magic mirror to me.
Yeah. What do you think, Trace?
So I think we are way more technologically advanced, and I think that what happened was we used the technology for evil. So since we used the technology for evil and there was evil everywhere, God had to come through and he said he'd wipe it out. The first time he wiped it out with a flood. Next time he said he's going to wipe it out with fire. But so he came, he wiped everything out. He had Noah, he had the pure genes. I think these demonic beings, I don't think they just had sex with humans. I think they were able to manifest themselves as animals. I think a lot of the stuff that you see that you thought were myths aren't. And people are like, well, that can't be. And I'm like, well, what are they doing with DNA now?
Yeah, and
they're gene splicing.
We talked about on episode 7, the Tower of Babel, and I proposed to you, Trace, the idea that the Tower of Babel was more than just a rebellion against God's command to spread across the earth, that it was actually an attempt to re-breach the spiritual that had been lost by the flood, and God was like, no, I'm not going to tolerate this. And that's my personal inference reading Genesis 11.
Right. No, I agree with you. I think that what happened was they were trying to reach up. So these demonic entities have been coming down for years. They've been taking humans. They've been experimenting with them. And now that as the time as the end comes near, like it talks about in the Bible, in Daniel, Book of Revelations, all that, knowledge is going to increase. Man is going to travel to and fro. Man is going to be like he was prior to the flood. So now instead of man wanting to turn to God, they want to turn to these interdimensional creatures. I'm not going to call them spacemen because they're not. They're interdimensional creatures. And I believe the interdimensional creatures are demonic because I never hear of anything good happening.
Yeah.
I never hear of a good story.
Yeah, it seems like there's a lot of from all the UFO stories I've heard, that the beings or whatever that appears will tell the truth until it has the trust of the person that it's talking to, and then it'll start deceiving and saying misleading things that don't quite add up. But that being said, Phil, we'll need to take another ad pause here real quick, so we will be right back after this short break. And we have touchdown, ladies and gentlemen, mystery seekers, conspiracy theorists. This episode is definitely geared towards you. If you are a conspiracy theorist, I believe you're wholeheartedly going to enjoy this episode. So, Phil, there was something, a couple things you said that I wanted to touch on after that ad there. First things, you said there's a lot of sexual focus with a lot of these abductions. I agree with that. That's something that you see in a lot of these accounts. Even with the, I'm sure you're familiar with the Skinwalker Ranch and how there's cattle abductions and cattle mutilations. And one of the common trends that I noticed in reading the Hunt for the Skinwalker, which is a fantastic book for those wanting to see more about this topic. One thing I noticed is that almost every single time the sex organs were dissected and removed from the cattle.
Yeah, from the cattle.
And that's just wild to me. There is a very clear sexual focus to whatever these beings are, and you propose that they are demonic entities. But it's very clear that there is a sexual focus to it. And then you see this trend, Phil, what you said is absolutely right, where we have accounts of this going way back all the way to, the beginning of time. Genesis 6, very, very clearly, reading it myself, dissecting the original Hebrew, I was blown away how obvious it was that there was genetic manipulation going on. And that there was sexual focus with these fallen angels. It is very blatantly clear when you look at the original Hebrew and what the original Hebrew means. And we've talked about that on the show before in our flood analysis. But yeah, so I definitely wanted to affirm what you're saying there. I've definitely seen that from my research and studies, that this trend has been going on for a while, and that there is a very weird hypersexual fixation from these demonic, alien, interdimensional beings, whatever you want to classify them as.
Just a bunch of horny aliens. Leave them alone.
Yeah. Well, don't forget, they talk about a succubus demon.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That sucks the life out of the human. Now, what's interesting is that it would appear that the gray alien, the most common alien, is just like a meat suit, shall we say, for the demons to transport themselves around, since they fell from heaven. But there always seems to be a female that looks very similar to a human being. So when these sexual acts happen, this female that looks very similar to a human being, they'll tell the human being that, gave its seed to the female, that the female is now pregnant with their child. There's also cases, but they're rare, but there's a few, not as many as they say, where women have said that they had sex with these aliens. The gray aliens brought them in. Another alien that looked more human appeared, or at least more human features. Some were reptilian, some of them were human type, and they were impregnated. And they've said that the doctor said they were pregnant, and then all of a sudden, they'd lose they said that they were abducted again 3 months later, and the baby was taken. Maybe they need the humans to start the process of the incubation of the seed. Now, if that's the case, it would go back like the book of Enoch talks, which was in the canon of scripture until the Catholic Church took it out, that the angels fell and mingled with humans. So like you said, there's definitely a sexual thing involved here. And why would an alien race want to do that? I don't understand that.
Yeah,
demons, I understand.
Aside from Trace's horny alien comment, there's really no.
Yeah, right. I understand. You can have that. I mean, it can happen.
Aside from like some extreme like that, I mean, it doesn't make sense for a species that technologically advanced. They should be able to figure, if they can travel across galaxies, they should be able to figure out how to, reproduce or clone in some capacity. I mean, we've already figured that out to some capacity with our limited technology. And so you kind of have to go with the idea of Occam's razor, which is the simplest answer is usually the correct one here. And it seems like being interdimensional demons or spiritual beings of some sort is more simple than trying to dance around the bush and say horny aliens.
Well, I think
you got to start somewhere.
Yeah, I think the physical aliens, I think you could explain that off by being like they could be trying to advance themselves biologically. They've advanced themselves technologically, but what's the next step after that? You want to try and better your species at that point then. So it's just an idea.
Yeah.
But I am
that is
definitely
a crazy
on
idea. But I would think if you're that far advanced technologically, you would have been able to advance your own species.
Oh yeah, I mean it's just one explanation. I think I am more on board with the interdimensional kind of idea of it and being angels and demons.
You got to play the Socratic method on Musings and Mysteries and Mythical Matrix. Got to play all sides of the argument. No stone unturned here.
Hey, do you ever remember the show UFO from the 70s? How old are you guys?
I'm 27.
I'm only 21.
Yeah, so that's a little bit before our time there.
Guys know the UFO show. They used to have a show called UFO, and they had bases on the moon, and the aliens were coming here, and they were actually abducting humans because they needed their body parts to survive.
Huh. That's interesting. That really does tie in with a lot of what we see with the phenomenon. So,
right. I mean, it's just now. Here's something that this is way out there.
Oh boy!
I believe
tinfoil hat
is going to
time.
be way out there. Yeah, put the aluminum hats on. I believe that everything you've seen on the movies and TV, no matter how outrageous it is, they've already done. And I think they got the technology from the interdimensional creatures, the demonic creatures. I think that Satan has to warn us when he's going to do something. I think that's part of the deal. And I just think that people just don't see the warning.
That is a trend I see tying into like the occult and witchcraft and all of that, is where you have to say what you're doing before you actually do it, I believe. Or there's some, I know we're going to have Bill Rudge on in about a month here to talk to us about the
I can't wait. I'm going to have to, is he going to do the witchcraft thing, or
he's going to be focused more on the occult and kind of tying the connections together with the occult with what you're laying out with us here with the UFOs.
He's really up on that. He's very good at that. He's been to Haiti a lot. There's a lot of witch doctors there.
Yeah.
Ooh, okay.
So good segue here. Talking about the occult and this nuance of behavior. There's this thing, Phil, called manifesting UFOs. Can you tell us a little bit about what that is, what that entails? Because I think that's a good contrast to what you're saying about rebuking these aliens in the name of Jesus and the response.
Just like you can rebuke them in the name of Jesus, you can call them in. So a lot of people do this through meditation, chanting, getting their mind in a specific position. Maybe using some sort of drugs. The Indians used to use peyote from the cactus plants, maybe magic mushrooms as they call, but supposedly that sets your mind in a right frame that you can call these UFOs into you. So my thing is, if you're calling them in, if they're that technologically advanced from another planet, how are you calling them in? But if they're interdimensional demonic beings, boy, it's pretty easy to call them in. I would think.
No, I agree. So that was kind of one thing that started to sell me when I started diving into the UFO phenomenon. I started hearing about being able to manifest UFOs, about staring at the sky and really thinking about UFOs and how you could actually, quote unquote, make one appear just by thinking about it. That doesn't sound like, no, I can't stare at the sky and make an SR-71 Blackbird manifest. Like for those of you that aren't plane nerds like me, that's one of the supersonic jets from the military in like the 70s. But I can't stare at the sky and make planes just manifest and pop out of nowhere. So the fact that people have reported being able to stare at the sky and manifest UFOs, that very clearly screams that there is something more than just the physical aspect of UFOs.
Yeah, I mean, how else would you call that in?
Yeah.
So what this thing is transporting from millions of miles away, and you called it in, you called it, and boom, it's here.
Yeah, you have all that power over a nuts and bolts craft traveling galaxies and galaxies away for, you just random Joe Schmo sitting on your porch, after working your 9-to-5 job, on a Friday night, you can just sit there and think about a UFO, and you can make a UFO appear like that. It's like, no, there's got to be something more to it if we're talking about all.
Well,
of that.
they also say that a lot of people say that when they look at UFOs, they feel like it knows that it's watching them.
Yeah, there's like a psychic connection or something usually.
So like people that witness these things are like, yeah, I felt it, knew that I was watching it. And there's also been cases of like they'll spot it flying around, but then as soon as they look at it, it'll like come straight towards them, like beeline it towards them.
Mm-hmm.
So there's definitely some kind of mental connection there. I mean the what's it called? The double slit experiment.
Yeah.
Yes, it's stuff changes after you observe it.
Yeah, how observing it or not observing it changes what the particle is. That's actually a really good connection. Look at you remembering quantum physics stuff after all the complaining about a quantum physics episode. I love it.
Yeah, well, if you notice, almost all these connections, not just with the UFOs, but the other paranormal things, they seem to have, they're like, well, it's talking to me through my head.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You have a lot of that.
Yeah.
Where they're saying they can hear it talking to them, but it's not physically talking to them.
Yeah. Very much.
And like you said, but that's a really good point that you can call it in. You should not be able to call an alien craft in from somewhere else.
Yeah. Well, we definitely went
But
down
interdimensional being.
we definitely went down the rabbit hole of rabbit holes, but Phil, that's what we're here for. I love it. So why don't you tell us as we wrap up here? We kind of started off talking a little bit about Roswell, and then we never talked about Roswell. So let's finish up talking about Roswell here for our listeners that aren't as familiar with what all that entailed. You can kind of give us a breakdown of what happened.
So Roswell, the problem with the whole Roswell thing is, now it happened at a ranch outside of Roswell. I can't remember the exact ranch's name like we were talking before. But, and they said, well, it was an alien thing. And they said it was like crunched up paper and it would go back to shape. And there were small gray alien bodies. And supposedly they put it in the newspaper that this was a UFO. And they took it out. And this guy saw it and that guy saw it. And I got this. But nobody has a picture. Nobody can really show any of this that it happened the way they said it. And I can't remember the fellow's name who started the whole story about Roswell. He was into UFOs, wrote a lot of books, had a dark hair and a mustache, glasses.
It wouldn't be
but
Bob
he was
Lazar,
the one who
was it?
I think.
No, Bob Lazar's a later
another
one.
story for another day.
Oh boy.
Yeah, Bob Lazar's another story for another day. But this guy, basically, what he did was he crafted the whole Roswell story.
Huh.
He believed in UFOs. He crafted the story from bits and pieces he got. I'm not saying the article did not happen in the paper. I'm not saying they couldn't have got the article right or wrong. I'm not saying that there wasn't some kind of corporeal body that was found there. I'm not saying it could have been like the government said. They've lied everybody's lied so much about it, you can't really tell what is true.
So here's my understanding. Here's my understanding of Roswell, because I just listened to some people do like a deep dive on it. There was some physical evidence that this farmer supposedly found. It's the memory metal stuff that they would crumple it up, burn it, and then it would just go right back to normal. And then some government agents or something came in and they were talking to him about it. And then supposedly what happened was they were like, all right, so let's go take a picture of it. And then they went back into the room and the guy said, oh, the box was swapped out. So then the picture that they have them is like obviously weather balloon material and everything else. There's more information, but this was also really the first government cover-up that they did. So if you look, they've made explanations on it like several different times, trying to say like, oh, it's this. Well, actually, never mind. It was actually this. And then, oh, no, it was actually this. It was like, why would you try and cover it up multiple times? That just makes it seem like it's more fake every time you try and give it another explanation. And so it's just begs the question of like, okay, well, what happened there? Something definitely had to have happened now. Oh
no, I think I'm agreeing with you. Something happened there, and they've muddied the waters so much. I don't know if you'll ever find the truth out now.
Oh no, we're never gonna find out. But
Yeah, so the question then becomes: is there is a lot of disinformation that's put out, and what you guys seem to be inclined to think it's more of the government. I'd be more inclined to maybe it's just these entities themselves, just like slipping in misinformation to maybe misrepresent things. Maybe the government's not as involved as we think, and that comes from some of my own research that there doesn't seem to be any dedicated region of the government for this. At least
there is.
I think only recently.
No. Recently, it's under ATIP. I can't remember what that stands for, but before it was under another name.
Huh.
And then they stopped funding for that, supposedly, and then they came out with ATIP. So there is actually like government-funded stuff, like Skinwalker Ranch. When Robert Bigelow had it, a lot of that budget came from the Defense Department.
Huh.
Right.
Interesting.
They did.
But yeah, maybe
the government. If the aliens are working with the government, like the calling, well, I don't want to call them aliens. If the interdimensional creatures, because they are aliens because they're not from this.
It's just the term we use for it.
Right, but I would think, like I said, they're definitely interdimensional creatures.
Mm-hmm.
I believe they're due. So if they are working with the government, like the calling elite, they're gonna want to fudge everything, because if you really get down to finding out what happened, what I always tell people is, you want to know, you want to know, you want to know, or you want to do this, you want to do this, or you want this done or that done. I go, you got to quit praying and wishing for that, because sometimes you get it and you don't get what you want. The story might not be what you think it is.
Yeah.
So, you might find out that, one of those government stories was real. It's all a lie. Or you might find out this was the first real connection where interdimensional demonic beings in the 20th century contacted man and may possibly even took over some of their bodies. So do you really, so you might not get the answer you want. It might not be these wonderful space aliens that are coming here to save us all.
Yeah, maybe you'll be in the next horror story.
Right.
The next UFO abduction.
Watch what you wish for. You got to watch what you wish for, because you just don't get it.
Yeah.
Sometimes you don't. You think you want this, and and then God, and if you go at it long enough and you go against God long enough, what's He tell you in the Bible? I'm going to give you what you want. I'll let you have what you want. But like I said, most of the time when you get what you want, it's not what you really wanted.
Yeah.
So I really, the Roswell, there's a good chance though that veil was ripped, because Alan Parsons was working in Roswell on that solid rocket fuel, and he was a follower of Aleister Crowley. So the veil could have been ripped, and if that veil ripped and some of those grays, because the gray, if you look at a picture, you can look at it, you can probably get it just about anywhere. Aleister Crowley's picture of his spiritual guide was a gray alien named Lamb. So let's just say Alan Parsons continued on with that, and he was able to do that in that area, and he ripped that veil, and some of those gray creatures came over here and didn't make it. Their corporeal body was left behind, but the spirit that was in it. Because I think that gray alien is just a way to move that body, move that spirit around. I don't really think it's I don't think it's a living, breathing person like we think. Does anybody have any idea what I'm talking about?
I think so.
I think I can get on board with them not being physical beings at the very least.
Right. I'm saying I think it could be a corporeal body, don't get me wrong, but I don't think it's like a living, breathing animal or person like we are.
Yeah, like a biological being. I think it's just
something to transport. Yeah. Right. I think it's just something to transport their spirit.
I mean, you have stuff like the Bigfoot that's also kind of, I think that's kind of also interdimensional, but then you have stuff like the footprints and all of that stuff. So there's definitely physical evidence left behind there, but it's just...
Which gets interesting because we have nods to things like Bigfoot all the way dating back to, tentatively, depending on how you want to define it, to early Sumerian mythology with the Epic of Gilgamesh. The way Enkidu is described, he's a wild man that runs around and has really long hair in the wilderness and hangs out with the beasts. And he's described as being an equal to Gilgamesh, who is often depicted as this being that's much larger and able to hold like a lion, like a kitten in his arms. And so it's like, you start looking and comparing all of that, and it does start to sound a little bit like Bigfoot. And so it's like, how long has all of this really been going on?
And, you have to look, some of these cave paintings do depict what looks to be a UFO or a plane or some type of airship capturing some of the people. It's gone down through the history.
There's I think either Indian or Egyptian carvings of stuff that, could be like some kind of like spacecraft or aircraft or something. I don't have any good examples off the top of my head, but I know that those exist out there somewhere.
In the pyramids of Egypt, there's carvings of what would appear to be. If you can get pictures of them anywhere. You can look for them online. It's a real thing. It's been documented many times. They look like spaceships, helicopters, airplanes, submarines, tanks. That's what they look like. And somebody carved them. So
we may not just be as advanced as we think in comparison to ancient times.
Yes. Yeah. We may not be anything for what we think.
Yeah.
But, so the Roswell thing, it's a shame. Well, maybe there's a reason they made it like that. Maybe that was the reason that the government and the interdimensional beings did it that way. So that we would be deceived. Because what they're trying to do is, if they are interdimensional demonic beings, as I say, they're working for Satan, and they're trying to pull as many people away from the truth as they can to their lie. And when the time comes and you're finally at the end and you're deceived by their lie, it's going to be too late to change your mind.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot to consider. You've brought a very unique perspective to the UFO phenomenon here tonight for us, Phil. I definitely appreciate it. It's a little bit more on the conspiracy theorist side than I might subscribe to. I think Trace is on board fully.
Oh yeah.
I'm still a little bit on the fence on some of the conspiracy theorist stuff, but I definitely agree with you that there is a lot of indications of these things happening for a very long time, and the trends do line up. And so you have to ask what this is, and you have to evaluate all the facts, and you have to lay all the cards out there and just ask all these questions to be able to explore it, to be able to expand knowledge. So with that being said, Phil, we'll be wrapping up the show here. You have any final thoughts you want to chime in for us?
No, but I am going to enjoy listening to you guys from now on, and please invite me back for Bigfoot or Dogman.
Oh, that would be so fun.
Yeah, sweet. We'll definitely have you back.
And you know what? And if you ever get into the we didn't land on the moon, I'm with that too.
I think that still falls vaguely within our scope. I feel like it's pushing the boundaries a little bit, but we could do an episode on that.
We could do like
point.
A bonus episode.
Yeah, like a little film, maybe a Patreon episode someday or something like that.
Yeah, it's hey, we're gonna have a bonus 15 minutes at the end of this one. It's about the because I tell you what, but my biggest problem is that some people. They want to make things more complicated than they really are. And they want science to explain everything. And our science is not ready to explain spiritual beings.
Yes, I wholeheartedly agree. We even talked about that like 3 episodes ago. Like if the fourth dimension exists and it's the spiritual, how do we quantify that with science? We're trying to take a being or, an object that is beyond our laws of physics and our understanding and put it into our dimension. That doesn't work, because you could test it in what seems like 2 situations that are exactly the same to us, but in that extra dimension is very different and get very different results that quote unquote disprove it. So no, you're spot on, Phil. You're definitely you're definitely of the right mindset for the M Quad team here.
Well, yeah, I tell you what, and I wish you the best of luck with going down for the Mothman thing. I wish I could go with you.
Yeah, that
But,
would definitely be a blast. We need to time something where we can go with you to one of these cryptid festivals or something. But yeah, for those
yeah,
of you,
you know what? And I'm up for that. But the next 2 months, I got to work 7 days a week.
oh yeah, I'm so sorry. Well, hopefully we'll be able to get you on again at some point soon. But
oh yeah, I mean, if we're doing a show like this, I can do it in the evening or on a Sunday afternoon. But I'd like to go to one of those things with you guys so we could debate some of them people.
Oh, yeah.
That would be so much fun.
Oh, it is so much fun because they really, I find that most of them are just, they're like on a wish string. Very few of them are in scientific or really have read into the subject. They just, it's like a fantasy. Yeah, I want it to be true.
Yeah.
And the problem is some of it might be true, but it might not be what you think is true.
Yeah, and that's where you got to bring science and logic and the Socratic method into all of
Right.
this
And
to quantify
when
it.
you start talking like that, they just get all, I've had them literally get up and walk away from me.
Well,
Not UFOs.
We'll try to sit in.
things.
We'll try to sit in on a symposium or two if the timing aligns and talk with some of them. See if we can make anyone run away from us. But thanks for thanks for tuning in with us tonight, Phil. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on. It's been a great conversation. All right, so that was Phil DeMattis. Has worked with Bill Rudge Ministries before. He's their resident UFO expert. And we brought him on courtesy of Bill Rudge Ministries. You can go check them out. They talk about UFOs, the occult, all sorts of these fringe topics from a Christian perspective, if that's your cup of tea. But yeah, Trace, do you have any thoughts or interjections after that conversation? That was a great conversation.
That was really fun. I wish
Yes.
I could have gone off on a few more tangents and explored some more things a little thoroughly, but I think for the most part, most of his stuff I agree with. There's a few things that I'm like, oh, okay, but like all the interdimensional stuff was really fun, and
Yeah.
it was nice to get a chance to talk about that.
Yeah, to talk about someone that's done their own research on this and come to the same conclusion that I've come to. Because I kind of did a big loop when I was looking into all this stuff, where I very much just, oh yeah, the aliens are demons, and that's just kind of what you're taught in a lot of Christian circles. So I just believed that, and then I kind of broke away from that, and I'm like, you know what? I think these might be nuts and bolts craft, and I started digging into it, and the more I dug into it, and I'm like, there's something else going on here.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's cool because you start to see all these people come to these conclusions on their own, or even like secular like people that research this will talk about like how they think there's something more to it, and they'll even draw connections to the occult sometimes. So a lot of good information, great conversations. Hope to have Phil on again soon. That'll be a good time. But yes, so for those of you listening, this episode releases after we've been to the Mothman Festival. So again, we're quantumly transcending time.
Oh boy, this again.
So again, we're quantumly transcending time here. But yes, the next episode, as we're recording this, will be leaving next weekend. This coming Friday.
This coming weekend.
Yeah, this coming weekend. This Friday, we'll be heading up to the Mothman.
We're heading down.
Okay. All right, wise guy.
Hey, you've done it to me before. I have to do it to you too.
Trace has 2 brain cells, and they're both fighting for third place right now, so he's got to try to assert some dominance. Oh, but yeah, I am going to have to go back and insert a not family-friendly safe
Yeah, that
tag.
kind of went off a little bit.
That went off the rails a little bit, but I'll kind of just slip that in before the intro. I'll be like, this was supposed to be family-friendly. It's not. So be warned.
It's just a few.
No, yeah,
so it's
no,
not too bad.
And it's all relevant stuff too. It's not
Yeah.
going into unnecessary detail, but it is an important part of the phenomenon to explore. But yeah, so we are going to the Mothman Festival, and we will be talking about our experience there. We're supposed to have guests talking about UFO, paranormal. What else? Cryptids, all sorts of stuff. So we're just going to go there, going to hang out. It's going to be our first M-Quad field trip. So the M-Quad Exploration Force
Well,
is
you
going
kind
to
of went on your own little field trip there.
Yeah, sort of. Yeah, that was another thing I wanted to bring up with Phil, too, to get his thought on. Hopefully he listens to this and he hears this. So yeah, Phil, if you're still listening, you're listening in after the show here. We talked about Serpent Mound, I think, on episode 11, and Trace proposed that it was a UFO coming out of an interdimensional portal. I definitely want to get Phil's thoughts on that.
I mean, I think at this point we just need to get a whole list to bring up with Phil.
Yeah, seriously. Oh man, that's definitely a good series worth of content here.
Oh yeah.
So you can't just do one episode about the I feel like that was just more of like an introduction, a summary.
Yeah, that was definitely an introduction because there's all kinds of stuff with Aleister Crowley that you could get into.
But we didn't even touch on Bob Lazar. I just mentioned
Bob Lazar. That's another. I wanted to bring it up because he started talking about like underground bases and stuff, and Bob Lazar was kind of a big proponent of that. But
yeah.
Anyway.
Yes.
Getting ahead of myself.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, I listened to I think the Joe Rogan episode with Bob Lazar.
Joe Rogan.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of Joe Rogan. I'm
gonna give you.
But,
I'm gonna give you a podcast to listen to later on after the episode.
All right. Well, Trace, you got a creature fact for us?
Yeah. So
better be Mothman.
Yeah, you want me to do Mothman as a little teaser. So
it's a man that looks like a moth. Cryptid fact over.
Yep, that's it. Episode's over. We're done. No, so Mothman, off the top of my head, I think it was 60s, 70s, maybe, that Mothman was first kind of sighted.
We'll have absolute answers to this after the Mothman Festival, because we're going firsthand to learn about it.
Yeah.
I even got us M-Quad business cards for our exploration.
They do look very nice.
Yeah. So.
But anyway, so Mothman, these people were driving down a road, and then there was just a giant silhouette, dark shape in front of them, and then they got closer, and it's this thing that looks like a Mothman. And
a Mothman.
Yeah, so I think it also like attacked their car, and there was some like physical like claw marks in it too.
Was it over the lights?
What? Oh,
lamp, brother.
Lamp. Yeah, that's just kind of a basic. I think there's definitely a lot more in depth to that, and a lot more stories. And even in like 2018, I think there was some Mothman sightings in Chicago, even. But there were all these sightings, and then a little after they started happening, a bridge collapsed, and it killed a good amount of people on like Christmas Day. And even before that, there were some people saying that they were having dreams of like a bunch of presents floating in a river. So it's a lot of weird stuff surrounding that.
It is interesting because as I'm exploring myth, there does seem to be, again, this is kind of preluding what we're going to be talking about in the next weeks or months, but the Epic of Gilgamesh actually has a lot of preluding of stuff that happens in dreams. Where Gilgamesh has multiple prophetic dreams before an event actually happens that he's able to get interpreted for him.
I mean, that's just a common thread in mythology anyway.
Yeah, but it's weird because I don't know, man. It's just you look at all this in relation to the interdimensional aspect that we're bringing to the show now. I definitely. It's definitely quite a shift to go from having my dad as a PhD in history to conspiracy theorist with Phil. But no, you gotta have people from all different spectrums to talk to, and you've gotta ask questions. That's how you seek knowledge. That's how you seek truth. So I'm not so much on board with all the conspiracies, but I definitely agree with the meat and the potatoes of what Phil was bringing to the show here. There's these beings that are interdimensional in some capacity, and that we're not understanding what they are. And I think there is wisdom to saying, hey, like, probably not the best idea to go out and look for these things, but if you are, you definitely want to be careful because you're screwing around with stuff that you probably don't understand.
No, that's where I'm kind of saying, it's like, man, it would be awesome to see something like that and have a story, but at the same time, I don't think I want a story. Like, I don't know what kind of story that might be.
It's like that one quote from that movie. I forget what it was, but it's like floating around on social media. But it's like talking about like fighting like this one big guy, like this like giant. And this kid's like, I wouldn't want to fight him. And the guy's like, well, that's why no one will remember your name. So, but yeah. Well, Trace, you got anything else for us?
I did want to kind of change here. I'm trying to incorporate, instead of like a little creature, I mean, there's still going to be some creature facts here and there, but I did want to try and bring a more like recent news of like UFO sightings or Bigfoot sightings or stuff like that. So I do have a New York Post article here from July 6th of this year.
Okay.
That a supposed Bigfoot with glowing eyes was spotted in Louisiana, 100 miles northwest of Baton Rouge in the Kisatchie National Forest. But a bunch of teens were out there, and basically they just saw that. They called police and said that they ran into a growling Bigfoot-like creature with glowing eyes. So that's just fun little...
Yeah, I think Louisiana has a lot of encounters with Bigfoot or reports of Bigfoot, at least from what I've heard.
I mean, where doesn't it? I think there's only like 2 states in the U.S. that don't have...
There's a lot of, like that post I sent you, or you sent me a while back, about like cryptids by state. And it was like almost half of them were like some variant of like Bigfoot / Dogman / Wolfman / werewolf. Like it was all like very similar for the most part, except for like West Virginia was like Mothman, of course. And you have like the odd ones. There's that one like jack-o'-lantern headed one with the lanky limbs. I forget which state that was though.
I don't even know what you're talking about.
Anyway, we're gonna explore cryptids. You know, it's starting to get to the spooky season time frame. So. Content allowing, and I think the content certainly allows, we'll be exploring a lot of these topics until the end of October.
You know, that'd be a fun episode series to do about just doing a deep dive into each of the states' cryptid.
That is true. Yeah,
that'd be pretty fun.
Speaking of cryptid news, though, I will put this out there since we might be attracting a whole bunch of listeners from the Mothman Festival, if all goes well. If you do have any cryptid sightings, you can please email us at m.quad.musings@gmail.com, and we'll possibly discuss it on the show if you have some kind of encounter you're willing to share. But yeah, maybe we'll get some fakes too. I don't know.
I mean, we won't know they're fakes.
Yeah, it's true. We won't.
It's just a fun story to tell anyway.
Yeah, it's like, hey, it could be true, could be false. It's a good way, and you can leave it anonymous.
Yeah.
I won't mention names unless you tell me it's okay. Probably. We'll see. Maybe I'll change my mind by the time you email in. So just kind of let me know, like, hey, I do or don't want my name mentioned. I mean, if you do a pseudonym email account, I'm not going to exactly have a name anyway.
We aren't going to track you down.
No, we're not going to track you down.
I mean, we might.
What? What? All right, news to me. All right. Well, I think that's it.
Yeah.
Just abruptly end it right there. All right, well, thanks for tuning in, ladies and gentlemen, conspiracy theorists. This episode was right up your alley as you sit tucked away in your corner with your tinfoil hat and you're sitting in your Faraday cage. So I don't know how you're getting signal for this podcast within a Faraday cage, but you know, it can happen. So we invite you to quantumly transcend time with us and email us at m.quad.musings@gmail.com. Please share your thoughts, confessions, concessions, contentions, snide remarks, whatever you have to add to this show. We'd love to hear from you. We want to have a conversation with our listeners on the topics that we discuss. So whether you're listening on the earth, above the earth, or below the earth, we thank you for tuning in with us tonight, and we ask that you have a good evening.
Toodles.